Book of the Week this week, Why Beautiful People Have More Daughters by Alan Miller and Satoshi Kanazawa. And this was an introductory guide to evolutionary psychology, and it stemmed from Robert Wright's The Moral Animal, which I have not read yet, but it was very intriguing. It really gets you to think about why we do the things that we do from an evolutionary standpoint, and it had a lot of definitely interesting information. I've just taken a couple notes here. I'll go over. Um, there was tons of stuff about sex and the underlying reasons that people do things. Mostly men. Why men are they can pursue the arts and the sciences and everything, and why that's so motivated by sex. And it talked also about, it was really interesting, it had a point where men are the most productive statistically, you could say. I mean, obviously there's exceptions to all of these rules, and this book is strictly from an evolutionary psychology point of view. So it's not that these points are 100% valid. It's just that they do have some weight. So most men have been found to be most productive before marriage, and they've done studies on this. Men will also take more risk before marriage, and it was interesting. They did some studies about men versus women, and the fact that statistically men have made more money, and the reasoning behind that, after some variables had been taken out of play, like different job variations and so forth, that would account for variations in money. So if that was all standardized, men would make slightly more money, because from an evolutionary psychology point of view, men seek out more resources, because that would mean that they would have access to more mates to basically, from an evolutionary standpoint, be able to pass on their genes. And so resourcefulness in men is considered attractive, whereas for women it's more of the physical attractive. And so for that, men are much more motivated than women are, biologically, to want to make more money. And so I thought that was just interesting, how there's a lot of people that are kind of debating that, whether there's a ceiling, and there's definitely some, or have been some things at play there as far as the working environment. But just strictly from this standpoint, from an evolutionary standpoint, men are biologically wired to want to have more resources, so hence more money. There was some other interesting points, just talking about the health of women and the attractiveness of women, and why long hair is more attractive. That men would base their decisions on a mate based on the health of a woman, and by having long hair, for instance, you can tell very easily the health of the person by their hair and how healthy it is. And it's really easy to tell the length of, or from somebody's long hair, they would have had to have been healthy for a longer period of time. So you can tell just by looking at them. Whereas if they have shorter hair, you may not know their health, or at least you might not know their health over the long term. So, it could be long hair takes years to grow. So if somebody's healthy for years and they can show that with their long hair, then they would be considered biologically to be more attractive. And then it was interesting talking about symmetry, like facial symmetry, how people with diseases or parasites or whatever else, in the past have been having, or have had, facial asymmetry. And so facial symmetry and bodily symmetry is another signal for health. And so a lot of the time, a lot of the things that would make, or the things that would men would consider women attractive were basically just indicators of health. So, doing a lot of research on health in general, that's really nice because there's tons of information out there that you can do to become more healthy and then inadvertently become more attractive, as a nice byproduct of that. So, and it was just saying the the waist to hip ratio of women is most desirable at 0.7, and that would look like something like a 36, 24, 36 measurement. And that's just another sign of health. And if you have a bigger waist to hip ratio than that, like not as small of a stomach or not as small of a waist area, um, it's another indicator of being unhealthy. So you have to be, I think they were saying in the book that you basically have to be healthy in order to have that ratio. If you're unhealthy or overweight, you're not going to have that same ratio. So that's what guys or males will find attractive just from a biological standpoint. And then men, it was saying, should have a waist to hip ratio of 0.9. So I don't know what mine is, but so you can take that into consideration as well. And there was a whole bunch of other stuff just about monogamy and polygamy and a bunch of other just really interesting things about why we do the things that we do, and how we might, by bringing awareness to them, be able to just take those things into consideration and think about them in a new light, and not just have them happen unconsciously, but be aware of them consciously and be able to do something about them. If you know that, for instance, if you're a man, you're going to be less productive before marriage, or if you need to be making more money in order to show off, to have more partners or something, you can at least understand that and notice, what are my motivations for making more money? Are they what I want them to be? If you just want to make more money to make more money, um, that's fine. But at the same token, I think that it's interesting, or for myself, I like to gain more awareness of why I do the things that I do, and by understanding some of these things from an evolutionary standpoint, from an evolutionary psychology standpoint, those can give us some insight into our unconscious motivations, and so that we can tap into those and change them. So like if you go to Alcoholics Anonymous, the first thing is you have to admit that you have a problem. So, for awareness, I think that you have to admit that you may have some unconscious programs. It could be biological, it could be environmental triggers, it could be food triggers, but the more of these things that we figure out and understand, I think the better, and we can consciously go in and change ourselves and our circumstances, and we can really make some changes there in order to better our lives and our environment and the people that we love and care about. So, a really fascinating book, and I think anytime you dive into psychology or evolutionary psychology, I think it's time well spent. So I hope you enjoyed the review, and take care.